present David Langwallner to speak second and against
It was almost 30 years ago when Matthew developed a detestation for my debating partner when I spoke in these chambers, but I was reminded of it in relation to an infelicitous comment I had, because out of sheer desperation when my former partner lost the debate for me, I had to make one of my extreme barrack room speeches. I made an indecorous comment about the Queen of England on a Republican side of the motion. I mention this not just to formally apologise to the Queen of England, but in the context of this motion to say this. The assumption is it's all over, and yet the Queen has gone. And that assumption thread, it's all gone. This debate is passé. It should have happened weeks ago, months ago. It's all finished. No, it's not. And my learned friend, or one of them over there, Tom, Tom or Mark, I'm mixing them up at this stage because although Paul Botan did say, Matthew, the public debate was intrinsic and we all welcome it coming back, I didn't see much of it over there. I saw a totally, hopelessly confused non-case, in fact. First of all, it may seem trite. The first speaker says, we're talking about England. The second speaker brings in Kiev. And this analogy about, well, I'm an alien, technically. I don't think I'm an alien from outer space yet, but certainly I felt a bit like that listening to their case. Where were we? We were in the territory. Remind me of the name of the film again. It's called
Alien Covenant.
Alien's
Yeah,
Covenant. Yeah. I was reminded of a comment that Michael Caine made about Jaws 4. I haven't seen it, I suspect they haven't. I believe it's terrible, but you should see the house it bought in Leatherhead. Now, you may think that's unimportant, but what has happened during COVID? The hidden hand. A small percentage of the world have made lots of money at the expense of everybody else by terrifying us. Drug companies have made lots of money. The Gates Foundation has made lots of money. This supranational Palento organization is sold all vaccines to the Greek people on the quid pro quo. Let's have all of your data, please. And they say, listen to the government. Oh, fountainhead of wisdom, that is Barnes. Well, I don't really know where I am. The Ukraine, Kiev, the English-speaking union, but let me try and deal with whatever this not the case was. Now, I think one point Mark made in all of this context was about quoting, and I don't mean to pick him up in his understanding of political philosophy, but having lectured it on law for 16 years, it isn't John Locke, it was John Stuart Mill who he called that quote about liberty. There's a bloomer for you, but of course he didn't even engage with the rest of the quote, did he? Mill didn't suggest that liberty was unconstrained or unrestricted. It could be curtailed for, wow, public health purposes, or drugs, or drunkenness, of which many of you may be victims of later. Well, it could be curtailed for all sorts of reasons. But I don't suggest untrammeled, unlimited liberty. My much more intelligent and younger partner here had to remind me to focus on the question of liberty intrinsically. Just because you are in favour of liberty, you don't believe that there are not limits to liberty. You believe in proportionality of response. And this has been a crazy, disproportionate response. Yeah.
So you agree with us?
No, I don't agree with I'm not agree with us. Sit down. All I disagree with, apart from your lack of understanding of political philosophy and your embracing of aliens, what I disagree with is what you're saying in terms of your alleged argument. You are saying we have to show everything the government did was wrong. No, we do not. What we have to show in general is what's gone wrong in terms of their value, subject to restrictions and qualifications, you'll talk about more eloquently, of liberty. And what has gone wrong is simply this. Apart from all the money going to Mr. Gates and the drug companies, what have this wonderful Tory government actually done? Regulated the right to protest. Ouster clauses being proposed. That seems technical, doesn't it? An ouster clause is when you oust the jurisdiction of the courts. And you pass laws which say, well, don't trouble yourself with alien immigration matters. You don't need to check that. Or counter-terrorism, one of the great fake news sensations. Well, you know, as far as I suppose Priti Patel is concerned, anyone who disagrees with her is a terrorist. We've reached the point of the criminalisation of dissent and deviance by people themselves who break the law in Downing Street and are therefore, dare one say it, criminals. So who's judging who? Later. But enough for the moment. I have to finish the sentence. So in this particular context, when we're talking about who is a terrorist, well, what is a terrorist? And does that mean you have an untrammeled right to detain somebody indefinitely on suspicion, or arrest somebody on protest and suspicion? And this is playing in your ballpark. This is playing in Britain. If you want me to play in Kiev, I'll play in that as well. Your point of information.
You brought up a number of measures that the government has put forward, many of
Yes.
which I don't particularly agree with.
Oh, good. You agree with us then.
None of which happen to have anything to do with public health. So to make it simpler for you,
Well,
do
we're
you
in
agree
favour of-
do you agree specifically with lockdown? And if not, why not?
This is about the virus. Now, maybe I've lost track of that point. The assumption is, with the Queen out, it's passed. The assumption also is that there are not going to be viruses to come, or variants to come, or versions of different forms of Omicron. The assumption is this is the end. It's not. It's an interregnum. It's a lull in the storm. Much as I hope Paul Bontang's aspiration of the ESU and their desire to continue this vetting programme continues, one wonders if this is not the dying of the light of public discourse. Certainly lockdown and the arguments of the proposition have showed nothing but the dying of the light of public discourse. Public health, my own colleague here said, well, what about all the people who are mentally ill? What about all the people who've lost their jobs and their livelihoods and the way they're physically suffering? What about the people who've committed suicide during COVID? What about the people who were infected in hospitals because they felt they had to go there? And when I used the expression the Black Death, which was not dissimilar to either Jonathan Sumption or Albert Camus, I'm in good company in that respect, I didn't mean that in a frivolous way. I meant it in terms of a proportionality to a public health crisis. It is not that measures should not have been taken. It is the measures that were taken. And I'm not putting this solely in the context of Britain. Britain has been relatively nuanced compared to, I'm half Austrian. The Austrians have gone mad. You know, let's fine people if they're not double vaccinated and boost them, and then let's lock them up afterwards. And is this going to continue indefinitely? Are we going to bring a generation of people up who are constantly terrified, double vaccinated for different new variations and mutants? And as my learned friend correctly says, it's not, to quote Bill Clinton in a different context, it's not the economy, dummy. It's not the virus, dummy. Wake up and smell the coffee beans. It is the beginning of the end at one level, or a new beginning of a different form of human existence. And that means it's environmental and economic problems that we will have to risk assess and confront, of which the virus, the revenge of Gaia, has brought to our attention in a shocking way. But to suggest jolly hockey sticks, it's all over now, with vaccine passports, potential data retention, border restrictions, surveillance capitalism, the wealth being funneled up to a narrow centre of people, and where's the security in all of this? Do you really think the Tory party or something are going to give people affordable housing as they lose their jobs, provide them with proper level of health care, which are also rights as well? No one is suggesting that this is not the case. But when you talk about governments or scientists who are basically bean counters, or economists worse still, on my way up to the English-speaking union, 5 minutes walk away, I had a wonderful drunken evening with somebody who should be here, but he's dead. And he was the greatest British intellectual of the last 30 years, Christopher Hitchens. What was he? a polymath, a humanist, a rationalist, not a bean counter, and not someone who ever listened to government policy, scientists, aliens from outer space, or spin doctors, and that's all we've heard. It doesn't even warrant the description, a case.